you're going to have to ask deeper questions that will bring out thought process, because everything else is going to be empty. There's no substance if there is no creator. We believe that everything happens for a divine reason, even if it doesn't look good, even if it's horrible, and that there is some underlying purpose that we're going to see in another world or another time when God will reveal, like, this is why this had to happen this way.
Growing up in the church, that really drove me crazy is that, just like why I started this podcast to talk about failure and struggles real time, what I found is a lot of people would tell their conversion story as if everything was wrong, then they found religion, now everything is right. And it's just not life. That's just absolutely not accurate at all. So for me, what I found is I've had many spiritual awakenings in my life where I run up against something and I just can't do it anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. And then I'm like, you know what? Something's got to change. Hey y'all, Josh Tony Robbins with the Derelict Podcast. Welcome back. We're so glad you're here. Would you do me a favor? It will only take you a couple seconds. Whether you're listening or watching right now, will you head on over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button? It really helps us get this message to more and more people that we can help. Greatly appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for being here, and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. For the disparaged, depleted, and delinquent souls trying to find our way, we're talking about the scary part of the journey, where we don't know how it'll end. Let's be free to face our fucking failures in real time as the most unadulterated, truest version of who we are. No sugarcoating. Welcome to the shit show, you derelict.
Hey, Derelicts, welcome back to another episode of the Derelict Podcast. We have a very special guest here today. We have the Jewish Tony Robbins in the house. Nathan, to be Jewish Tony Robbins in the house. Nathan Hoffman, otherwise known as I'm gonna screw it up now that I just tested it with you. Nathan Hoffman. That was pretty close, right?
Yeah, it was good. That was
Even
good.
though I'm emphasizing the too much, maybe.
It's okay. I know. Yeah, it's a hard one. Even my family, it's hard to say.
You know, and I'm Italian, brother, so we're all about vowels, not consonants. So consonants are a lot more difficult for me than vowels.
Makes sense.
I can give you an all day long, but not the consonants. Anyway, so here's the deal, you guys. I'm really excited about this conversation. If you've been following for a while, we did some religion episodes in the past where I talked a little bit about, the title basically is failing at religion as a kid, failing at religion as a young adult, failing at religion as an adult. Now, if you listen to the episodes, it's obviously not about failing. Everything in this podcast is about failing, because failing really is just, I tried to do something or I intended to do something and it didn't happen. So because of that, failure is a part of everyday life. We have a hard time talking about failure because we think that makes us a failure. It provides some sort of shame. But it's really not. Failure is just the next step in success. Now, the reason that I thought it'd be really interesting to have Nathan on the podcast today is because I grew up in a very religious, observant, household where we did all the things, different religion, Christianity instead of Judaism, but still very similar. Obviously, have a lot of similarities between the two as well. Growing into, I wouldn't say I'm in a secular state now. I very much have a really great relationship with my God, my higher power, but it's different how I observe that than it was when I was a child. So I had to go through this path of learning what that meant as an adult, specifically as a middle-aged man. Now, what I think is really interesting about Nathan's story, which is why I invited him on the podcast, besides the fact that he's going to be the Jewish Tony Robbins, which I think is amazing because if any of you have been listening for a while, you know that Tony Robbins is one of my heroes. But the other reason too is because Nathan had the opposite story, right? Where he grew up, more secular, Nathan?
Yeah, completely secular, yeah.
Right, completely secular, and became observant, became religious, became the word that you want to use, plug and play right here, in his adult years. And what I think is really interesting is we talk a lot about men, specifically middle-aged men that are going through transition. We talk a lot about men going through divorce, going through business failures, going through business success, going through different relationship changes. And the thing we don't talk about a whole lot on this podcast that I want to talk about today is, what does that look like spiritually? What does that look like in a religious, observant way? What does that look like when you have to get to a point where you think, well, there's all these traditions and these things that I have instilled in me as a child, which, by the way, even if you grow up in a secular home, that's still instilled in you. That's still a form of religion. Even an atheist has a form of religion that they're embedded with as a child. And then how do you take that into an adult? And then more specifically, how do you take it into as an adult when you're middle aged and you're really trying to go through this other realm of finding yourself? So yep. I'm really excited to have you here, man, because I think this is
happy to be here.
A really good conversation.
Yeah, agreed.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about kind of your background or how you grew up that you think might help the conversation?
No, I mean, it was just very a typical childhood in America, East Coast, and basically, public school, college, your traditional way of growing up, I guess you could say, and following all the traditional trends and things that were cool. It was all about a lot of external stuff, money, cars, just I guess the typical. I grew up. I'm in '81. I was born into like MTV Cribs and all the glamorous things that you kind of watch growing up, and so it was just a very typical childhood. And it wasn't until I was like early 20s where I had this weird vision of just death and the plug being pulled, and that was it. There was no nothing grotesque, just like that was it. And for some reason, I couldn't accept that, and that started kind of my questioning. And it wasn't until I didn't find Judaism really until I was like early 30s. And it was I was just blown away because I had no idea. I thought it was just some ancient, people not driving on the Saturdays and not, just crazy stuff that, who the heck would do something like that? Camels are old school. It's no more, we have cars, technology and things like that. And so just, like I said, it's just a very typical standard, upbringing in the US.
Yeah. Interesting. I talk a lot about spiritual awakenings is what I call them. And I don't know if I don't know what the actual definition of a spiritual awakening would be. Actually, I'd be curious. Maybe I'll look that up while we're having this conversation. But the way I define spiritual awakening is that you get to a point where something isn't working, whatever it is in your life, and you finally get to, so addicts call it reaching bottom, right? Hitting bottom.
Yep.
It doesn't necessarily have to be from an addiction, though. I would say the same thing happens, I think, just in life, where
I think it's empty. It's just emptiness. There's an emptiness and that's the.
Here, let's look up the definition before I start saying what my opinion is. So I just looked it up online. This says a spiritual awakening is a transformative experience that shifts a person's fundamental understanding of reality or life's meaning, often triggered by a life event that resolves previous challenges, leading to a deeper sense of purpose and connection.
Well said.
That up. That was so much better said than what I would have said. But I feel so. I hear some people talk about a spiritual awakening that they had like it's a one-time event. I think this often happens in religion, at least it did from the religious viewpoint that I came from, which is a conservative Christian viewpoint where, everything happens and you're secular and then there's this one spiritual awakening happen and you find Jesus and then everything is different. And what I found a lot growing up in the church that really drove me crazy once I started getting older is that just like why I started this podcast to talk about failure and struggles real time, what I found is a lot of people would tell their conversion story as if everything was wrong. Then they found religion. Now everything is right. And it's just not life. That's just absolutely not accurate at all. So for me, what I found is I've had many spiritual awakenings in my life where I run up against something and I can't do it anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. And then I'm like, you know what? Something's got to change. So I'm curious, was this a series of spiritual awakenings that led you to becoming observant? Was it one specific thing? You mentioned obviously kind of your dream and that sort of thing, but can you expand on that a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that was what started it. That started the exploration side of things. It was like, okay, what is the point of being here? Like, what is all this about? And everything that I was told, which was to be successful, meant money, cars, dating girls, lots of girls, and this and that. And that was like the definition. And for me, it was empty. And I just kept feeling over and over again, like partying with my friends, doing the same thing over and over again. I love my friends. I love my family. But there was just something that was definitely missing. And once I started to learn, I went into a lot of different things that I sort of learned about, like Buddhism, meditation. I really just tried to get through everything because like I got the six pack and I was like, okay, now what? And then like I made the money. I was like, okay, and then the car, and it's like, you just go through that same thing. And I also read a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which was very, very impactful.
One of my favorite books of all time.
Yeah, it was amazing. And like, so I was like, oh, it's all about meaning. But like, I didn't know what that meant either. And so it was just this cycle of like trying to figure it out. And it's there's no such thing. Like in Judaism, it's more of a relationship, and that's like the point. It's a relationship with God. It's not it's not like one thing happens and then now all of a sudden, it's really like a relationship. And I just didn't realize how much depth there was to Judaism and how much work I really had to do. Like I was a good guy. I was, I would say a very, upstanding citizen, but like I had so much work to do. And it was in a good way. And it was just I was just very blessed to like see this when a lot of people just kind of go through life. And actually I was starting a personal growth company before all this really happened, and just realizing that like you don't have to wait for something bad to happen before you live your life and really figure out what you're here to do. And so I had that kind of like mindset, but not really from a relationship with God point of view, until then I started to learn and realized that's the ultimate, is that relationship. And so, yes, that's kind of the progression and how it started.
So let's come back to this for a second, because I really like what you just said. I think that I know that a lot of people see any religion as a set of rules, a set of expectations, a set of things you have to do, often filled with shame, often filled with should, right? Don't should on me, I won't should on you. Often full of a lot of shoulds, a lot of should nots, a lot of you can do this, you can't do this. And you made a really interesting comment, and that is, it's not about that. It's actually about a relationship with God.
Right.
Tell me a little bit more about that. I think that's an interesting perspective, and I wonder how much of that perspective happened because you came to religion later in life versus as a child, where it maybe is more about rules. Do you have kids, Nathan?
Yes, I do.
How do you incorporate that? Maybe I'll get to that in a second, but answer this question first. So I'm curious,
Sure.
What would you say to somebody that says, well, religion's all about rules, it's all about shoulds and should nots, it's all about what you can and can't do?
Yes. So I think that's part of the relationship. And that's the beauty of the relationship, is that there are sometimes things that you don't want to do, but it's part of how we connect. So in Judaism, it's called a mitzvah. And a mitzvah also connects to the word connection. So there are things that we do that we might not want to do, but this is how we connect. Like it's basically like the roadmap. Now, it's from the outside, it looks like shoulds, and you should definitely do this. You have to do this. Don't do that. It looks like all these restrictions, but in Judaism and in the like Kabbalah and the Kabbalistic, which is like the esoteric and the spiritual, like you say, very spiritual depth of the learning, is that these are the things that actually separate you from, just rule following and basically growing. It's like you are now connected to infinity by putting yourself within these commitments. So, it's very hard to explain from the outside. On the inside, it's like there are these things you have to do, but it's like everyone has the option to do things how they want to do it, but Judaism gives you kind of the structure behind it to say, yeah, this is what it means to live a holy life. And it means praying 3 times a day. It means saying certain scriptures and stuff. You say, like, these are just part of that. And it's a major aspect of connection. And that's where it's like, it's a very unique perspective on it, because yes, on the outside it looks like rules, but when you're in it, you realize that's how you connect. And this is like the form of connection that God wants.
Interesting. Okay. When I coach guys, I was actually just having a conversation the other day about this with one of the guys that I coach. And that is that with him specifically, and with a lot of men that are in this space that end up going towards shame with whatever they're doing, what I often talk about is there's good and then there's better and then there's ideal or best,
Yeah.
right? Instead of there's good and bad, because good and bad often produces shame because I did something bad. Like I ate the wrong food, so therefore I'm bad. I don't have the six pack, therefore I'm bad. My business didn't grow the way I wanted to, therefore I'm bad. We were just talking about before the podcast of I don't have the followers and listeners that I want to, therefore I'm bad, right? Like instead of what's my ideal. So what I hear you saying, which I think is interesting, is, well, this is the ideal way of having a relationship with God. We're not going to tell you exactly how to do that, but we're going to give you parameters to try to help you, which is, I mean, man, that just sounds like coaching. That just sounds like mentoring. That just sounds like following somebody that's further along than we are. It just sounds like wisdom to me. And what would you say to the person though that says, look, I have this, I want to have this relationship with God, but I don't want the rules. I don't want the obligations. I feel like this is just shooting on me of things that I have to do.
Yeah. So I think if you want to have a relationship with God, then you should have a relationship with God in what God says is the way to connect. Now, that doesn't mean, again, you need to have shame. Like you said, I think it's a great point, is that there's levels. Because at a certain level, me being observant, every moment I have should be either learning Torah or, doing mitzvahs or doing the things that I'm supposed to be doing, which is basically impossible for almost anyone living today. But the point is that it's being on, like, I think that's part of the hardships, is that today we have such a I want to live it my way, whereas like you kind of take out, like it's like an ego side of things, whereas this is kind of like letting go of some of your ego side of things of how you think it should be done and doing it based on what God, I mean, we believe that the Torah, the Bible, is divinely created. We don't believe that it was created by man. We don't believe like it was created by God. So when God says, something about like shaving the beard, which is another story, you can still cut your beard, but this is how he connects. And some make sense, some don't make sense. And that's the beauty, is that, a lot of it makes sense and a lot of it can be rationalized, and a lot of it could be like, oh, this is why I have a great relationship with my spouse, because we do it this way. But the point is, we're not trying to do it because it makes sense. We're trying to do it because we want to connect and be the best version of ourselves. And the Torah, which gives us that playbook, is that. And that's how, kind of we live through it.
Why do you think that, I mean, you can answer for yourself or you could answer in general. Why do you think that most Jews don't believe that the New Testament, the Christian Bible, is the word of God, or that Jesus was God?
So to be honest, I'm not so well-versed, but basically because Judaism has a very clear outline of what Mashiach, which is the Messiah, looks like, and the way it acts and the way he acts and the way things work. And so based on Judaism, that's never happened. And it's not saying that, obviously we know Jesus was a Jew and he grew up Jewish, but well,
he's like we just man of Jews, right? I mean, is there any Jew that's done more than he has for the world? I mean, whether you believe he's God or not, I don't know.
Right. So I don't know how to really answer that, to be honest.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, we have a strict understanding of what it looks like when the Messiah will be here and when it's going to happen. And we don't believe that there's a son, or like, we just believe there's an individual that will be the leader of the Jewish people, will be like the next king over, in Israel. And that will actually be an individual, a person, a human being that is connected like Moshe, who's a prophet and someone, at the highest of levels. But it'll be very clear based on all the prophecies that third base of Mikdash will be built and everything else. So like, there's a lot of signs and things.
Really fascinating to me because, you ask I would say from my experience, you ask pretty much any Christian, they're like, we don't understand why Jews don't see Jesus as God because he fulfilled all the prophecies. And then you ask a Jew, and they're like, yeah, he didn't fulfill all the prophecies. I'm like, I just don't even like, doesn't make sense to me how very intelligent people on both sides can read the exact same thing and see such complete different things. I guess part of my question for you, and I don't want to go too far off a tangent here, but why Judaism? Why did you pick Judaism? Like you said, you studied kind of other religions.
Well, just
what
for
was
me,
it about that one that stood out to you?
Yeah, for me, it just connected. I mean, it just connected to, like, I could internally in my soul, like I felt that this was me. This was like who I was, like And so it was just something that I felt deep down was a part of me that was just being discovered. And I think that was the, kind of the impetus to it, that like, I was like, I couldn't believe it was Judaism. And the things that I, thought and were interested in, like, I just couldn't believe it. And I was just blown away by like the intentionality behind everything. Like, it's just, there's a reason why we do everything. There's like, we say a blessing before we eat food, after we eat food. It's like a whole way of living that I've never ever even thought about. You know what I mean?
Are you part of any specific, I don't remember what they're called, sect or tribe of Judaism?
Yeah. So I'm considered observant, or there's a lot of terms you could use, but one is Chabad, which is it's another observant group.
Hasidic compared to what you are?
It's part of the Hasidic groups. Yeah.
Oh, you are part of the Hasidic groups?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
got it. I asked because I've been in finance pretty much all of my life. And one of the companies that I worked with for a long time, I did a lot of work with them, had a very big Hasidic Jewish population of advisors. And it was always really fascinating to me to go to conferences and meetings and everything else, because all of those guys were studs and they did so much business. Like they just crushed it. I think it's just the discipline and everything else that comes along with what you guys all do. I mean, it was just amazing. Let me give you an idea. They crushed it so much that when you would go to a conference for this company, this national, I'm not going to mention the name, but this national, we'll talk about it offline, this national company who is based in New York, just like every other financial company. When you would go to a conference of the top of the top of the top leaders, there was such a large proportion of people from around the entire country, and most of them were obviously from New York, but from around the entire country of Hasidic Jews, that they would have an entire separate section for them. Not just food and prayer rooms and all these other things, but you're talking this national company, which is supposed to not be towards any sort of religion whatsoever because of the world we live in, had an entire section for them. And I always thought that was so fascinating. And it just showed how much power they had because of all the business they did, which is completely understandable. Yeah. But I guess here's what I want to come back to, because I really love what you said. And it actually comes back to my own personal spiritual journey. The main reason it's fascinating to me, because I feel like the main reason I don't like labeling myself at this part in my life is the same reason as you do like labeling.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And the reason why is because it's not because I worked through all my bitterness and resentment and frustration for how I was raised. That took honestly years. It took therapy. It took a lot of letting go. It took a lot of forgiveness. It took a lot of these things that I had to do. And I'm really grateful I went through that process, because, I can walk into a church no matter what the religion is and just like, I'm not going to be offended. It's fine. I'm there. But for a while, I was very bitter. Part of that was my bitter divorce that ended up pretty much ruining all my relationships, my relationship with my church, all that sort of stuff. So a lot of people hear me now and they're like, oh, you're just bitter. No, I'm not bitter. What I've discovered is that my spiritual awakening, and I'm wondering how many guys relate to this that are listening, my spiritual awakening has more been, I realized that as a child, my God box was pretty small, even till my young adult. Like, this is who God is. These are the words God says. These are the actions God takes. And that's it. So if it's outside of this, and I think that this is maybe this is a big reason why people have problems with religion, whatever you want to call it. If God is outside of this box, it's not God. And then people get upset about that, and then they kill each other over it if it gets really extreme.
Yeah, right.
Which is still happening around the world.
Correct.
I view God as this, you view God as this, dead, right? I mean, that's been the course of history. I have a problem with that as well, because what I've realized the older I get and the spiritual awakening I've been through is that, like, there's no box. Like, the box doesn't even exist anymore. It's not, oh, this is outside of the box for God. It's, if God or higher power or universe or whatever people want to call it these days, I don't care what you call it. If there is this force, this beauty, this creation, just this creator, whatever it is, like just this thing, how could we possibly think that we know it? How could we, to me, it's just way too big. Now, in my own personal journey, you got to be careful with that too, though, because if you go too far that route, then it's like, well, everything and anything is God. Well, I don't know if I want to go that far, because I
which
don't want to
is
say that, all these genocides and religious wars and everything else are God. I don't believe God is good. I don't believe God does those things. So got to be careful with that. I have to be careful with it too, because my name is Joshua, and, I guess different people could read the book of Joshua differently, but the way I read it is a shit ton of genocide that God did to other people that weren't in agreeing with him. Adults, men, women, children, animals, etc., that Joshua did. So the why behind it will be debated probably for all of eternity. But it's been it's an interesting namesake for me, because of trying to, I guess what I'm trying to say is, to me, God just keeps getting bigger. And I think it's really fascinating that the way you are finding your God, your higher power, your connection to the bigger in this world, out of this world, in this universe, you are finding that through a specific set of doctrine, rules, structure. And that's how you are experiencing God, that you didn't experience God when you were younger.
correct. Well, I would say fully, because I did have my way of connecting, but it was just like, I would say a certain prayer and I would just connect through talking to
I
him,
just
because I
mean
was like,
more, a
correct.
higher level of connection.
That's definitely fair.
So
Yeah.
I feel the same way, because growing up, I haven't abandoned my Christian principles that I grew up with. I actually still believe in a lot of them. But the way that I connected with God back then versus the way I connect now, seeing God as this much bigger thing, is very, very different. It's an elevation of that. And I just think it's really, really fascinating that you have found that through a structured, observant way, and I found it more through an unstructured, unobservant way. And what it says to me too, for the people that are listening, is the most important thing from what I'm hearing so far is actually going that path and being open to it, and actually exploring the spiritual awakening that you're going through.
Yeah.
And I just feel like so many men, we were talking about this a little bit, and I want to hear your thoughts on this too. So many men in today's society, especially online, don't even talk about this. Like it's all about getting the six pack, and what I say often is it's all about body and business.
Yeah.
It's about body and business. You're going to see a man talking about it. Nathan, I'm not sure if I've told you this before or not. I will every once in a while just do a test on my own social media, and I'll post something about body or business, which is not usually what I'm posting about. 9 times out of 10, the body or business post gets 10 times as many views as all the other ones that I do, because that's all that guys seem to care about, body and business. So I'm wondering, what would you say to men as far as being open to the spiritual awakening, the spiritual journey, trying to figure out what they believe in, God or higher power or universe? I say those other words for people that are offended by the word God, because some people grow up in a religious context where God is used for evil. So use the word you want to use, but there is something bigger than you. If you don't think there's something bigger than you, then you are an egotistical narcissist piece of shit. Otherwise, there is something bigger than you. So the goal then is for us to try to figure out what that is and connect with that. So what would you say to the men that are really focused on body and business, and they're not focused on this spiritual journey?
That somehow you're going to have to ask the deeper questions that will bring out this idea, or this thought process, because everything else is going to be empty. There's no substance if there is no creator. It's very simple. I mean, and the way you were talking about God earlier, like, first of all, one of my favorite sayings is there is no box when it comes to like creativity. But when it comes to God as well, we believe God literally is everything. So I know for you, you said it was very hard to say because of like the evil that, things that we believe that everything happens for a divine reason, even if it doesn't look good, even if it's horrible, and that there is some underlying purpose that we're going to see in another world or another time when God will reveal, like, this is why this had to happen this way. And we have no clue why. And like, obviously we've been through some crazy atrocities with the Jewish people and the Holocaust or whatever. But like, the point is we can't rationalize it, and we can't say like, oh, well, he did it because of something. We can't understand it. Like you talked about earlier, there is just absolutely, you cannot understand God, but the best thing to do is to try to have a relationship, based on what you can have a relationship with. And I think that's the key, because in Judaism, God is everything. Like God revolves around everything, and there is no blade of grass that blows without God's involvement. And that's one thing with Judaism. That's
So let me
really
ask you something, because you said something interesting. So I think from a lot of at least outsiders' perspective of Judaism as an example, which I would say actually is probably accurate of a lot of religions, is that a lot of religions' focus is understanding everything. And you just said that you can't understand everything. So how do you
at all.
do
Yeah.
you resonate those two of like trying to figure out God, but then also realizing you can't figure out God?
Yeah, I think that's where, like in Judaism, you have so much in terms of like books and scripture and stuff. Like it's really infinite amount of things that you can learn in Judaism. It's never ending. And I think it's really just the journey. Like everyone talks about when it comes to life, it is the journey. It is the connecting, and it is the understanding that, we do things in a way that helps us connect, and it helps us, be a part of something way bigger than ourselves. And, Judaism has the polar opposites, where it's like, it's all about the community and it's all about you. It's both ways. That like, it's the individual has to be able to do what they can do, but if they're not part of a community, then there's nothing there either. So it's like, you're always dealing with these dichotomies and polarities of opposites. And that's, I think the key is to go through that journey and to just continually grow and get better. And at the end, realizing that you really had no clue about anything. And that is like the greatest knowledge, I think, in the sense of understanding, is that it's way beyond, we can't comprehend. This is why there's so many things that we do that we do not understand, like kosher. While some things might make sense, so many things do not make sense. And so if we just go on what makes sense, we like 50%, 60% of the stuff that we do, we probably people wouldn't do. But I think this is also a testament to the Jewish people who've lived for thousands of years and have still, the religion is still the same and still going through the same, reading the same Torah, the same, things that we've always had. And I think this is what has allowed us to have the longevity that we have had in terms of religion. I guess you'd say the oldest religion, at least that we know of, because of this guideline and connection with the creator.
I think it's really interesting what you said. What it makes me think of is the concept of paradox. And I know the concept of, at least from my understanding, the concept of paradox shows up quite a bit in Judaism. It shows up quite a bit in Christianity as well. And I just looked up the definition of paradox because I was curious about that as well. A seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statement or proposition that when investigated or explained may prove to be well-founded or true, which is fascinating because
Yeah.
paradox is there's this thing and there's this thing that seem to be opposites, right? They seem to be contradictory as the definition stated. And yet when you look at them really closely, they actually work together in this weird way. And to me, that's like the best definition of God probably that I can come up with, is that there's all these things that seem to not make sense, but yet somehow eventually always work. Like you were saying, it's kind of the question that a lot of people ask, like, how come bad things happen to good people, right?
Exactly.
Like how could God allow bad things to happen to good people? And then you have people on the Christian side that like will reverse that and be like, well, how could good things happen to bad people, right? Like, why is God so good, right? So we could go down that whole rabbit hole forever. But I love what you said too, just about exploring the journey. I guess here's my question for you. For somebody that they're going through some sort of transition in their life, and it could be traumatic or not. Let's say that they're just getting into that middle-aged space and they're trying to figure out, what's my mission in life? Maybe they're starting to second guess some of the things they're doing, trying to figure out, like, am I actually living on purpose? Am I living on mission? Am I actually doing what I'm supposed to be doing here on this planet, which is the transition I've been going through the last several years, and I'm still on that transition myself. It's also the time when, as you probably know, and I talk about this a lot, is that the highest rate of suicide is 35 to 50-year-old males. because I think a lot of men get to that state and they're not happy or they're not content or they don't feel fulfilled. And I think the biggest reason why is because they're not connected to themselves and their higher power. So for the guys that are out there watching this that are maybe not feeling fulfilled, maybe they're not feeling like they're living on mission, or they're trying to discover what that is, what are there any practical steps that you would give them? Any questions that they could ask themselves? Any things that they could ponder to try to start this journey or continue this journey?
Well, I think the first thing is if someone's already thinking this way, that's a very, very good thing, because the point is until you feel the emptiness or you feel the lack, it's very hard to do anything. And without that, you could just go through life. I call it like sleepwalking, and get to the end and just be like, what the heck? So if someone is going through that situation, I feel like it's a very, very good thing in the sense that they're actually acknowledging it. So another thing when it comes to, I know you were talking about someone who's having a hard time and went through something very difficult. I don't know, something you see was not connecting. Is it okay now?
You were breaking up there for a second.
All right, it's weird. I don't know. I'm back good though.
You look a little blurry, but I think we're good. Sometimes it's hard to tell with Riverside because sometimes it shows a little bit of a blurry thing, but it records just fine. Okay. So I don't think you're delaying right now. I think we're good. Do I look okay on your side?
Yeah. Yeah, looks good.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
All right. So, yeah, I was saying a lot of times we look at these things and say, like, why me? Why does this have to happen to me? And I think the big frame shift is always like, this happened for me. This is something, no matter what is going on, is here to help and guide me, no matter if in the moment it looks good to be the complete opposite. So that's always like a good reframe that I've always used. And, we learn about a lot in Judaism, and it's that everything is happening for you, even if it looks really, really not good. And when it comes to mission and purpose, I mean, I do it very simple. I forgot what the actual exercise is called, but you just go into the 4 areas. What do you do great? What do you love? What does the world need? And how can you get paid for it? And the intersection of those 4 things kind of help you identify where your sweet spot is when it comes to work. And I have a document I'm happy to share with you and your audience to help you identify. Yeah. But I think those are the 4 key areas that help someone really understand it. And a lot of times when you're talking about those dark moments and those hard times, that is the exact thing that you can help out someone else with who's going to go through it in the future. So it's usually the darkest moments, the people that have gone through the craziest times that are able to come out and thrive after that because of that experience and how they can now help people who are going through something similar in their lives. And so you see that all the time.
Absolutely. So it's always the darkest of days that bring us the biggest light that we can share with others.
Exactly.
So you brought up a document that you're going to share with us. I'm going to add it to the show notes for anyone listening, watching right now. How can people reach out to you if they want to reach out to you to get that document and have a further conversation? What's the best way?
Yeah, sure. Instagram and Hoffman only up is the best place. And just starting. I left a full-time career a few months ago, so just getting started on this journey. And this is exactly that exercise. Basically, things that I went through is just figuring out what am I most passionate about, what am I best at, what do I love, what does the world need, and how can I fulfill that? So,
I love that. Those are what's great, the love, the need, and the paid. I love that. That's a great way of thinking about that. Okay, so again, listening, watching, check the show notes for Nathan's Instagram handle if you didn't catch that, and reach out to him. What do you want him to? Do you want him to send you a message or something to get that document?
Yeah, sure. They can message me. Alignment.
I love it.
Yeah. Why not?
Message alignment to Nathan on Instagram. Sounds good. Something you said earlier reminded me of a quote that I've heard a few times now on social media, and I might butcher the quote, but the essence is most people live the same 6 months of their life over and over and over again until they die. And I thought that was really powerful, because how often, before I start pointing the finger, how often do I do that? And how often have I done that? Not in order just to be curious, not to produce any sort of shame within me, but how often have I really just lived the same 6 months? The same 6 months with my kids, the same 6 months with my relationships, the same 6 months with my business. And man, that is challenging for me in a really positive way of just what if. So there's that whole idea of what if you just got 1% better every day, which I don't know. I don't know if I love that. I get it, and I get what people mean by that. It just, to me, it puts a lot of pressure on. Like 1% seems like a lot. But if I think of this in terms of, well, what am I more on mission this 6 months than I was last 6 months?
Yeah.
And how can I be more on mission the next 6 months than I was the previous 6 months? We were talking about this before the podcast started. As of the recording today, the podcast just turned a year old. So by the time this airs, it's probably a year and, a couple months, something like that. That's only 2 6-month cycles. And if I think about why I started the podcast, and there's a bunch of videos on that, you guys, if you haven't watched them yet, go watch them. If I think about why I started the podcast in that first 6 months, the first 6 months was dramatically different than the second 6 months. I was dramatically more on mission these last 6 months. I was dramatically more focused on what I do great, what I love, how I want to give back to the universe, how I want to give back my mission, how I want to work with men. Dramatically different that second 6 months. And I know for myself, I can fall into these shame cycles of like, you're not doing enough, or you're not where you want to be, or beat myself up, right? I beat myself up more than I beat up anybody else in the world, even though I try not to, and I'm getting better at it. But if I look at that, man, that's encouraging. That's hopeful. For you just starting into this world as well, I hope that you take that as encouragement.
Yeah, no, I definitely do.
The previous 6 months versus the 6 months before that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've always lived with the mantra of just going out and doing it, and doing what you believe in, and knowing that I know God has my back and I'm not worried about it. And before I became observant, I just thought it was just me, and I saw so many failures happen, and things that happened were just like because I just wasn't connected. And now that I'm connected, I truly believe I'm invincible in a positive way, where it's that I'm going to do the work. I'm going to do whatever I can. But at the end of the day, the big boss is the big boss. So, you just do your best and leave the rest to the big boss. And that's how I approach anything.
I love that, brother. That's so good. I wanted to restate this quote that you said earlier too, that I really liked. I think I got it right. Tell me if I got it wrong. There is no substance if there is no God.
Yeah,
I get it right?
I mean, I think that was about what I said. I mean, it's everything. I mean, it's really everything. And I think it's without it, there's just a huge void. There's
Yeah. What's the purpose? What's the mission? Like if and again, let's just remove the word God for a second for people to get offended by that. If there's not some big power, which is why I tend to like the term higher power, because it removes any sort of religious connotations that people might have issues with. If there's not some big power in the universe that is orchestrating things, that created things, that is in charge, that's bigger than us, what are we doing here?
Yeah, what's the point? What's the point? There is no point.
I mean, is the point just to be able to collect a bunch of paper that has some sort of denotation on it that it's money just to have it? Like just to have a bunch of shit? Like what I mean, I remember
that's why, I have such a hard time. That's why I have such a hard time. I love Alex Hormozy. He's a brilliant business mind and brilliant. But I've heard him speaking about not believing in anything. And I promise you, there will be a moment that he believes. I promise you. There is no other way. He doesn't have kids. He hasn't gone through, there is no other way that he's someone that smart is not going to figure out there's something much greater than him and everything else that's happening in this world.
You know, I trying to figure out how to say this in a non-demeaning way because I don't like to be demeaning to anybody. But here's what I'll say. Here's what I
No, and it's what you know. I'm not being demeaning. I'm just
I
saying
know you're
in general.
not. I think
know
Hermoti's a
he's
stud,
going.
man. We're on the same page. He's a total stud. He's a marketing genius, business genius. I follow him. I do what I can to follow what he says. And here's what I'd say just in general about people. You can see a lot in the eyes. And when I look in his eyes, I don't see fervor for mission. I see wanting money, wanting business, wanting fame, wanting to accomplish these things, which I think are all very respectable. I'm not against them, but I don't see, how do I say this? I see something different in Alex Hermosi's eyes than I do in Tony Robbins' eyes.
Right.
Both very successful, both very respectful, both very, or even Dan Martell, the man that we are both connected with through our business coaching program. The thing that I see in a Dan Martell or a Tony Robbins' eyes is different than what I see in an Alex Hormozi's eyes. And I don't know if I can really explain it, but I think you can see a lot in the eyes. Like I look into your eyes and I see mission, I see passion, I see purpose, I see here's why I want to be doing these things. I don't see that in a lot of eyes. Pay attention to his eyes next time you watch his videos.
Yeah, we'll do.
Tell me what you think.
No, I know the eyes save so much. There's no question about that.
Yeah. And again, that's not a negative for anybody, but you know what reminds me of, Nathan, is that I heard this, I can't remember if it was a book or somebody just talking about this, but somebody went out and they basically interviewed a bunch of billionaires on their deathbed. And guess what the common theme with all of them was the exact same. It was that they wished that they had spent more time making better connection with their universe, their higher power, their God, and their loved ones. 100% of them said the same thing. None of them said, I wish I had more stuff. I wish I had more success. I wish I had more fill in the blank. So I absolutely agree with you. There will come a point in everyone's life where it just won't fulfill what you think it's going to fulfill. Working and workaholism is an accepted addiction in our culture, but it's an addiction far more devastating at times than heroin. They're the same addiction. They're doing the same thing because they're not accomplishing mission and purpose and everything else. They're just accomplishing whatever my next fix is. And we all have a different addiction that we use. Some people use religion as an addiction.
Yeah. Distraction.
Some people use addiction groups as addiction. One of my favorite movies of all time is Fight Club. And one of my favorite aspects of that movie is the fact that the addict got addicted to addictive groups. It's amazing. We'll choose anything. And to me, my connection with my higher power, my God, my universe is the anti-addiction. It's the way that I get away from the stuff that enslaves me, that burdens me, that entraps me. And I think it's really fascinating and beautiful. And I love the fact that you're on the podcast to show that that can happen in a religious context, because I think a lot of people, including myself at times, see that as more enslavement than as more freedom. And I love the fact that you showed us how it's freedom. Thank you for that.
Pleasure.
It's good stuff. Is there anything else as we wrap up here that you want to, again, leave to that man that is either on that spiritual journey or maybe not on that journey yet? And maybe they're just thinking, yeah, I don't need this, or I just need to focus on my work or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like I said earlier, it's just at one point in time, you're always going to have to ask those difficult questions. You're always going to have to ask, what am I here to do? Why am I here? Who's important to me? Who relies on me? And what am I here to do? What is it? And I believe Judaism, it's very clear in Judaism, but like the day you were born is the day that God said the world could not exist without you. Every person that was created has a unique purposes, people that they're here to build up, to help make better, to help grow them, to help them not have to go through things that you went through, and to learn and grow. So ask the questions early. Ask the questions now. Don't wait to the deathbed. Don't wait till someone, who you love, who's close to you, passes away. If you do the work now, you'll be much more at peace with everything in the future. every relationship you have, you'll be able to have a closer connection to the person, and it will just allow things to transition much easier. If someone did all of a sudden pass away, then you would be able to do it in a way that was more connected as opposed to reactive. So I think that would be my
That's
my final
beautiful.
remarks.
That's really beautiful. Have you ever read the book A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis?
No.
When his wife dies, he writes a book just about kind of the spiritual experience of that grief. And it's such a powerful book. I actually recommend it to anybody going through any sort of grief, not just death, because I think there's a lot of just elements of that. And yeah, it's fascinating when you're secure and you're connected and you have that relationship with your higher power and your universe and your planet and everything else, how different it is when somebody dies than when you don't.
Exactly.
And I also just think that's really beautiful what you said. Could you imagine if all of us on this planet actually believed what you just said? And that is that we're here for a very specific, unique reason. And that the only reason we were born is because of some specific thing to give back to the world. And we lived every day of our life. Like, could you imagine the world like that? That is my idea of heaven, or whatever you want to call it.
So this is our idea of when
The
Mashiach
New
comes,
Jerusalem,
and
right?
this is it. It's everyone's in peace. There's no more wars. Everyone knows it's one God. Everyone
Oh, beautiful.
is included in the plan. It's not like anyone's excluded, and that's it.
That just seems like, the New Jerusalem, the new world, the new universe, the new afterlife, whatever any religion wants to call it, heaven. That's what that would be like to me, is everybody's living completely missional, purposeful, and realizing that like the planet needs you.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
good
I mean,
stuff, man.
if people just realize that, I mean, it would change everything.
Absolutely.
Every
Well,
time you woke up.
I'm going to try to remember that more today. So thank you for that.
Pleasure.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, man. This was a great conversation.
Thanks for having me.
And again, for people watching and listening, check out the show notes, connect with Nathan, reach out to him for that free resource that he offered earlier. And please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Even if you're not watching on YouTube, go to YouTube real quick, subscribe to us, like the episode. And most importantly, as I say pretty much every episode, if this spoke to you or somebody came to mind when listening to this, that is going through some sort of transition or difficult time or exploring their spirituality, please send it to them. Send it to them. Have them reach out to us. Me and Nathan, you have two resources right here that they can reach out to. So thanks again, brother. It was a great conversation.
Thanks, Josh.
Until next time, we'll see you later, you derelicts.